Everybody, welcome back to Contest Prep University, episode 3 in our series, 5 critical steps to planning your peak week. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Adam Atkinson. And this is a point, Adam, where in my list of questions that I need to ask most clients as I'm preparing to map out their peak week, part of it is a little bit of an audit of their micronutrition. How much sodium are you consuming? Add up what's in your food sources, condiments, etc. How consistent are you being? It's pretty rare to have really gathered that information too far in advance. It's usually just not that big of a deal unless somebody, for some reason, is just not losing body fat at an appropriate pace. But you get to this point, and if you don't start doing that kind of calculation, you can be really surprised. I've had clients who are eating 10 grams of sodium. I had no idea. Some really weird things happening there. Sodium to potassium ratios just because of the kind of foods they eat. So if you're a client working with a coach, that's something I would prepare ahead of time. Hey, I've been kind of looking at some typical days and here's the norm for me. Is that okay? Because as I'm planning that peak week, again, just like we talked about in episode 1, we need to kind of match those things up a little bit. And if we need to make a little bit of adjustment, if I think that would help, that may be fine. Or I just need to scale my expectations up to where you've been if that ends up being perfectly appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of those things can change. I recently had a client this week. She was really high on sodium. I said, I really want to go in with a load. And even though this isn't like a horrible amount, I'd feel comfortable going into the show with that. I do feel like it could be dangerous if I increase you from that. And I would much rather go into your show with a little bit of an increase in sodium. So we dialed her back a little bit. And then just recently, I had a guy who was measuring his salt above his food and he missed the teaspoon. And he thinks they got probably an extra teaspoon in there. So what we did is we just increased that extra teaspoon the rest of the week. His sodium wasn't super high anyhow, but he didn't really know how to accurately report it to me. So I said, well, we can assume your sodium's higher today. Let's just kind of match about what we think that is. You're not too high in general. So let's go ahead and just make our bump up on sodium maybe a little bit earlier in the week. I maybe would have read about that a little more had been like 2 days before the show or something like that. But even then, I feel like we can kind of move that up and kind of go in with that higher sodium. So definitely wasn't as big of a deal as how it looked when his text came through. And once he got to speak to me, it was definitely the end of the world for a minute. He was thinking about skipping the meal. And I was like, no, I think we'll be fine. Let's just raise your sodium up a little bit the rest of the week. And he still looked great.
Well, this is where I think a lot of coaches do a big disservice in stressing clients out, thinking there's some magic place of perfection that they need to be, and B, that you can even really know that person to person, our own genetic needs. There's no coach who is doing an audit with every single food. Oh, you have a banana every day. You don't. You have this. You don't. There's no way you can calculate, down to a very discernible level in grams or other units of measurement for all the different micronutrients that you may be consuming. So for a coach then to all of a sudden say, oh, by the way, now this is the perfect protocol. You're going to have this much added sodium, this much added potassium, this much this. What I like to tell my clients is, whatever you're doing right now is baseline. Like, this is your norm, if this is very typical for you. So let's do what I'm suggesting here, kind of an audit. Now let's really look at these food sources and the micronutrition that's in it, plus what you may be adding, specifically mineral sources. And let's just decide how best to moderate or create consistency for peak week. Because again, we're planning peak week. And then as you maintain this whole series, then we can adjust. This is where the coaching comes in. We're going to observe how you look. We're going to look at your weight. We're going to look at photos 2-3 times a day. But to worry about every single little, milligram or IU or gram of every single micronutrient possible, it's just not going to happen. And it's it's untrackable at that level.
Yeah, I compare this to golf so much. Like if those golfers could swing a hole in one every time, I mean, they obviously would. There's a lot of changes: wind, your swing, the lie of the ball. And this is really what peak week is like. We're managing all of that stuff. We're not gonna hit a hole in one every time, but we're we have multiple times to make changes and swings up until the show day, when you reach the pin. So we want to be as close to that pin or hole in one as possible by the time that we step on stage. And, the big thing is don't do anything crazy and hit your, pitching wedge as hard as you freaking can when you're close to the green, like you just want to kind of tap it in, as they say in Happy Gilmore, just gentle, gradual changes to, finish the game.
I don't know, man. Depends on the lie of the ball. You can hit that. You can kind of de-loft the pitching wedge and make it like a lob wedge. But anyway, we're going to go on to episode 4, where we're going to talk about some supplement changes. And I think this will have some interesting aspects to it. And then we'll finally wrap up in episode 5 with food. See you next time in Contest Prep University.